outlook, let's continue to look at what's going on in energy. I want to bring in Scott Bauer, Prosper Trading Academy CEO. So Scott, the Suez Canal seemed to be provide a small blip, a small boost to the market. And now it's expected the OPEC Plus meeting, as Inez was just describing, is going to keep those production cuts through to May. Now, those cuts were successful recently, but as we saw on some of those charts, we have seen oil prices starting to fall. Do you think that the oil markets have priced in that cut extension already?
I do. I really do. Saudi really wants to keep it, and they're looking at least until June. So I do think they've kept it in. And also, what happened with the Suez Canal, some of the outlook at the end of last week and even over the weekend was that there could be this blockage for another week or two. And then almost seems like miraculously, things started opening up. So that definitely put some pressure on oil prices as well.
Talk to us a little bit, Scott, about prices at the pump. I think week over week, they actually came down a bit, although year over year, of course, we're higher just because we're out of the lockdown mode.
Yep.
What are your expectations for gas prices as we head further into driving season?
Well, you have both sides of the coin here. And in fact, gasoline sales for 2021 for the first time just exceeded any time in 2020 for the first time since last March. And, that's more of not so much the demand destruction. It's just a little bit of the reopening. So, we're coming into the high driving season, but is the high driving season really going to be part of the reopening? I think prices at the pump are going to remain fairly steady. I'd be surprised if we see, gas at $2.50 a gallon, $2.40 a gallon. I think that, at least here in Chicago, it's all around $3 a gallon or so. I would not expect a spike, but I don't think that we're going to see any major drop-off from this point.
Mentioning again, going back to that OPEC Plus meeting, Scott, I'm wondering if you think that there's a possibility at all that those cuts will be extended even past May, or if you think OPEC Plus is going to decide to ease some of those production cuts.
It would not surprise me to see if they went out to June, quite frankly, which is only 2 months out. They're very, very concerned about what's happening in Europe, and conditions in Europe are really a lot worse than they are here in the States. So they're very concerned. Saudi does not mind these cuts. It's 7 million barrels a day, and Saudi has an additional 1 million. Maybe they're going to have a little bit of a tug, a little bit of a tip with Russia, who does want to, pull back on those cuts. But June, in my estimation, is reality, going past May.
I want to pivot for a moment away from oil and talk about some earnings reports that are coming up that I know you're keeping an eye on, and namely Micron out with earnings after Wednesday's closing bell. We've been talking a lot here on Yahoo Finance about the chip shortage, how it's affecting a whole bunch of different industries. I know that Micron just recently dipped below its 50-day moving average. What are your expectations there, and would you buy on any weakness?
So number one, I would buy on weakness, but the expectations for Micron, they've pretty much said it themselves, are monstrous, through the roof, if you will, because just about a month ago, they came out and they raised their guidance. So, unless they meet these expectations here, you could see a little bit of a sell-off here after the earnings print. But again, I would be a buyer on any dip whatsoever. I'd be very cautiously optimistic, only because they've set the bar so high for themselves.
Scott, wondering, as you're looking out ahead, some of the post-pandemic plays that you think are going to turn out to be winners. You had mentioned Micron in your notes. You also mentioned Chewy. Are there others?
I think there's a handful of these stay-at-home stocks that obviously were the glamour stocks over the last year or so, Chewy being one of them, Peloton being another one, that I think will continue to stand out. Maybe we don't see the type of growth that they had, at their peaks towards the end of 2020 and even first month of this year before those stocks have sold off a little bit. But I think some of those stay-at-home stocks and even a Zoom that now are a brand name, right? They're, when you talk about, pet food, you talk about Chewy. When you talk about fitness, you talk about Peloton. When you talk about connecting people, you talk about Zoom. They're a brand name. Those are the stocks I think you really have to focus on. But moving forward, there's a few infrastructure stocks that I think are really need to be closely watched, especially if the infrastructure plan that's on the horizon here actually comes to fruition.
All right, Scott Bauer, Prosper Trading Academy CEO, thanks so much for joining us today. And coming up, we